I think some of the lack, and this is something we discussed in our pre-conversation, I think some of the lack of clarity around this whole thing is some surprising inconsistency in the way people perceive the definition of these acronyms. So there's DAM, there's CMS, there's ECM. Do you guys each want to sort of talk about what they mean to you?
Okay, I'll start. So DAM, data asset management, means to my world, and again, I thought that was important to describe where we fit in the marketing supply chain and being specific about a certain supply chain. So we're managing and delivering assets, and those assets are heavy TV, commercials, high-res Photoshop, TIFF files, their sound, their digital flash GIFs, a whole cluster of different types of assets. So the systems that we look at and we leverage to bring value to our clients have to be able to handle these assets. Now you're understanding the assets that we're dealing with, and be able to publish them automatically, resize them, resample them, be able to edit them, annotate them, share them, and the list goes on. So a DAM in my world is a WIP DAM. There's two of them. A work in progress DAM, which we use certain pieces of technology for, certain platforms for, and we are on the opinion to look and leverage technology companies that are best in class that provide those technology foundations. So we have a couple of, if you will, WIP DAM solutions. And then once that life cycle is done, that workflow, that we're working on these heavy lifting assets and we're repurposing, modifying and such, it's going to end up in a strategic DAM. Okay, and that strategic DAM in our world is the final repository that can be used to reference, repurpose again next season, and the list goes on. And then from there, you would call that nearline. We would then probably archive that over a certain period of time, depending on the client's requirements, and that would go into an archival DAM offline. And in all that, in concert with all that, in parallel, we have redundancies around those systems that if they ever go down. Okay, so that's the DAM definition. Darn it. In my world, and I'll hand off. And then I'll tell you where I think CMS lives. But before that, so my perspective, and this is where we had some good discussion on, and here's my perspective. I think a CMS system is a system that can publish a DAM product. That's my perspective. So all those assets that I'm working on, the systems I'm using, or my clients are using, are not a CMS, but they might publish to that CMS. Okay, that's my perspective.
I'm having a tough time understanding why they're different systems at this moment. They're still all managing content, and they do subtly different things, but those two things could be combined together into one and really make it a powerful thing. You want this back?
Yes.
You want this? Okay, go ahead, Larry.
There's one over there if you need it. So before I
Somebody
take
without a microphone soon.
Before I take exception with USB drives, which do break and then you lose the data if you haven't backed it up somewhere else to
Like the cloud?
more expensive. By the way, this is a sales pitch to go out and buy Amazon stock because Marque is going to fill it up, and that's great. And I do want to explain what I mean by ECM, which is, I think, the granddaddy of a whole bunch of CMSs. I want to start by pointing out I think what Ken is describing and what Marque is using is more media management. It's more this beautiful, rich, collaborative video, TV show, this highly complex data that does fill up terabytes of space, and why you buy a 2 terabyte disk, and it fills up and it's $100 because you're going to buy 50 of them to get something accomplished.
Talking about archive, I understand your point of view, and you can archive it, but how many people do actually, how many times a year do you have to go back and get? Somebody needs that document. Again, I understand our business, it's like we want you to find news from 3 years ago, 4 years ago when we started publishing.
Let me disclaim that when I say archive, I do not mean offline, and I don't even mean nearline. I just mean not in the forefront of your technology. I don't want to see something from 3 years ago until I need to go out and find it. I only care about what I'm working on today, what I'm working on a week ago, what my colleagues are working on. So this gets into those terms and how we use DAM. I backed into this group, into this conversation, because I sought out a digital asset management system for a museum software package that I'm buying for the New York City School Construction. We have 1,000 schools, we have all this beautiful artwork, and we needed to index and manage it. And I said, well, that's digital assets. Let me buy something that's highly specialized, that's not just a generic content management system. I want the metadata to be structured a certain way. I want the, I'm gonna forget all my museum terms, so I'm not even gonna try them right now. But in that conversation and being here, I realized that media management, the advanced content management systems, there's a lot more to it. And we don't need to agree on the terms, we need to agree on the business and make the terms work for us. And if Amazon works, great. If you're working government, you can't use Amazon, so don't even try. Go ahead.
There's Google, there's Microsoft, there are
The
all
cloud, you can't use the cloud.
You can't use the cloud?
You can't use the cloud.
Okay. You still using WordPerfect 5.1 as well?
WordPerfect
Yeah,
5.
okay.
Yes, we
We
are.
had this conversation earlier. They are actually using WordPerfect 5.1 somewhere.
So that was a good first question.
Yeah.
And we have questions here? No?
So can you guys talk about some of the experiences you've had integrating DAMs and CMSs, or not, choosing maybe not to do that, or finding that maybe to some of your points, that Mark, that maybe you didn't need to?
Okay, from my perspective again, we have a lot of brands that we work with that may have a DAM on their own, a DAM solution within the organization, and they may have a CMS solution as well. And from my experience, say we're working with 407 different brands nationally or globally, most of them aren't talking to each other, and they're siloed. There's a stakeholder for each one of those systems. So before we start to say, have we seen the integration, let's talk about the dynamic and the politics and the silos that go on within the organizations themselves. So, and it's unfortunate because a big financial firm that we're working with has an excellent DAM, excellent, but they have no leadership around it. They're not leveraging it. 2 years prior, somebody had bought it, put it in play, but never took ownership of it. So they never activated and leveraged the tool set, if you will. They also have a CMS. CMS was growing, had leadership, and they exploited and leveraged the CMS to a point where it was acting a little bit like a DAM. Not that I want to talk that way. So it is interesting. Every organization is different, but I do see a theme, and it's that the DAMs and the CMSs are living separately, managed separately, and they're not integrating. And I think there is time now, and I think recently we're working with a client that has built a CMS that is working for them very well. They know they need to integrate their asset management system, or ours, or another third party's. And we're looking at how do we build those APIs to publish the assets. This is where I was going back with that idea that a CMS lives as this content management system, and it will publish the asset to it. It's not doing the heavy lifting and the things that, in my world, we're artworking and we're managing those assets through a workflow, if you will, tied to the DAM. So I think in the journey for GSG, we're going to see, more, and we have to pay attention to this, we're going to see more of those CMSs being integrated to DAMs, because I think companies have to get smarter about the things that they purchase and put on their platforms. And it's just the economies are forcing these efficiencies, and that they're finding that they need the stakeholders to drive them too. You know, whether a client would leverage our DAM or DAMs, because we have various types of DAMs. It's another complicated thing, depending on the requirements of the client. But I think we as a company need to be a little bit more thinking to the left here about what CMS means. We have our own CMS internally for GSG, and that CMS is Mambo, and we leverage it's a freeware, and we use it, and it works great for us internally. It's not even near integrating to our DAM. It doesn't need to. They're two different worlds. On my perspective, and this is where we have a difference of opinion, we can debate, and that's why we're here, is that the CMS is going to be that document-driven publishing vehicle to help organize and collaborate on, but it will publish the heavy lifting assets, those media parts, if you will, for reference and such. But it won't do the workflows that we're talking about in the DAM world that I live in.
So, and as much as I'm that, they say, enterprise type of perspective, I don't know if that we're ever going to merge and have one master DAM or even a couple merged CMSs. I look at the amount of data and the amount of complexities and the amount of uniqueness between the 20 or 30 mainstream DAM offerings that are out there, the 50 or so mainstream CMS offerings out there. And to me, we're only going to get to federation. We're only going to be able to connect where needed between these unique systems. And we have a work product that we're going to end up with at the end of the day, and that's great. And you're a partner for many of these other companies, and you're going to federate the work that you're offering to what they have. But you're never going to converge. You have your own built system, and that's great. But you should expose it. And that to me is where we're going to end up, is just with the federation. Sure, a few of our applications we can shut down. We're paying too much in maintenance, or the IT guy who built the dam 5 years ago left us, and we don't want to hire him again. We can gobble it up. Great. But there's still going to be a divergent amount of technologies out there.
But, I would say this, that if we're doing our job as GSG and researching, understanding the technologies that are out there that are best in class, those systems, a prerequisite is they have to have the back-end XML exchange, which that's
got to be interoperable.
That's got to be your number one thing. And it needs to be open enough to communicate and have interoperability, which is a key word that a lot of folks like to use. And if it doesn't have that, then that's not going to be a solution for us and our client. So I think that, and again, my perspective is that the systems that we're deploying, those platforms, have to have openness, integration, or interoperability with other systems. And they better be the lead. They better be a leader in this space. And they better have, and again, another prerequisite, it better have a lot of resources for development. And I'm not talking about 2-3 people. I'm talking about 1,200 to 1,500 people that are researching and building that product base and the portfolio offering. So when we look at, your North Plains and your media beacons of the world, they're just like utility way back when. We don't house our own power source here. We go to the energy companies. I'm looking to leverage those best practices out there, and it better be open.
And I wish that idealistically all the everyone that's here has the same conviction and the same ability to only leverage the best in breed and to continue to strive forward. Where I've come from, traveling in various companies, it's just not there. And there's semi-closed systems, semi-open systems, systems that were homegrown and have evolved, especially when you're talking CMSs. Maybe not as much media management in DAM, because it's only been around 8-10 years in its modern form. But when we talk about content management systems, there is this, my system works well enough, and we're not going to change it, and everyone's trained and knows how to use it. That's got to be good enough. But when we want to upgrade, I'm definitely coming here, because we want to evolve to the idealistic state.
Can you hand that mic down? I think we're having a mic trouble. We're just going to focus on that mic. This one here.
Which one? Which one?
This mic.
A?
The one that was over there was...
That's noise.
Yeah. That's no, you're talking, so you keep that. Well, I was going to have problems with or no?
The one that was over there is the other one.
That's a bad one. Okay. All right.
Well, no, I was going to pass the baton to you either way.
I actually don't remember the question at this point.
Do you have some examples you can talk about as far as integrating DAM and CMS?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is very interesting we're talking about, there are the homegrown systems everywhere you look, and I think it's just because both the CMS systems and the DAMs they just weren't there. They weren't necessary years and years ago, and so everyone's first attempt is you brew it yourself. And then, it's like beer. It starts off, just somebody brews it originally, and then eventually you develop Budweiser. And now we're starting to get CMSs and DAMs that are much more, they are best of breed, but we're also getting open source, and that's where my experience has been, using Drupal CMS that we paid a lot of money to customize, but it was still a Drupal CMS, and it plugged into an open source DAM. Now, I'm not going to plug the DAM all that much because I was disappointed, and probably because it didn't have, thousands of people working on it. It was a very small community that didn't support this thing. But I'll tell you, one of the things is both Drupal and it had hooks into each other, and they could communicate using, it was more than just an XML interoperability. It was an object that connected the two together. Now they talk very different languages, and I didn't. They weren't ready for Amazon, by the way. That was one of our big challenges. They really wanted to mount a drive and store stuff on, vinyl apparently. So the 8-track tapes. But it was, we did have to get around that. But again, and going back to it, it's like once you get to that level of interoperability, you have to ask yourself, why do I have 2 different systems by 2 different manufacturers that do different things, but things that are relatively close to each other? I mean, I'm storing an image, or I'm storing content. I have tags on it that identify that image. I have tags that identify that content. I have a guy in the front doing something.
He's tagging the chair.
He's tagging the chair. And even when we go to publish using the CMS, we are publishing, but we're not just publishing that content. We're publishing the connection back to the final product that we created using the DAM. And again, in a Drupal and PHP world, it wouldn't be that hard. We could have built a module in 40 lines of PHP code that could have done what we were using the DAM for the most part. One of the reasons we chose to use a DAM, though, had to do more with having spent all the time, energy, and effort to reproduce that ourselves. But it wasn't anything that we felt was all that complicated. It just was, why do it? This was prescribed for us. We ran with it, but once we had it, our long-term maintenance costs seemed to be a huge issue, just because you have these 2 disparate systems that you have to keep managing and maintaining. This gentleman actually had a question at one point.
In terms of how I've thought about the 2 systems, workflow always comes into it. In a lot of situations, one system is the workflow engine, the other one is just sort of static repository. And I guess the question I sort of have for all of them is what is the state of workflow between your DAM and CMS? Is one more workflow dependent, or are they both equally workflow dependent? I think you kind of have, you're just doing what you're doing.
Well, no, I'm sure they have different opinions too, but I'm going to tackle that first, because the problem is that the way we engineered it, we spent a lot of time working and simplifying, by the way, the workflow of the content. And so in the CMS, it was very workflow oriented. It was very straightforward. The DAM was not. It should have been, and it needed to be, because there was raw video, different revisions of the video, things like that we were not actually addressing within our implementation or integration. And again, that's where I go back to, you look at commonalities between the CMS and the DAM. You want workflow in both of those. You want revision control in both of those. You want to be able to put things in different stages, from raw, like a draft form, to a reviewed form, to a final product form, and they both need to do that. They both have to have data to look them up. So, like I said, we did have workflow only on the CMS, and the fact that we didn't put it in the DAM, I think, is a huge failing on our part, and I don't know if they'll ever rectify that, only because our client, meaning the internal editorial team, didn't understand the need for it, and they don't look at it that way. Who wants to get one?
So let's define workflow too, because in my world, the workflow is, and this is where content or CMS comes into play a little bit. It starts with a creative brief. And even though it's in the creative world, I have a workflow, or I will be part of that workflow of the creative brief and gathering reference materials for the creative brief. And it may be something that they went back over to the strategic dam to pull out to say, we're going to repurpose this for a new season. So I would argue that there is a CMS component within our workflow as well. Now let's define workflow. So to me, the creative brief is shared, it's reviewed, we're collecting important reference materials, manuscripts, whatever it may be. And that's collected in a folder structure that's smart, that's publishing through the browser. Now that gets done with the creative workflow, and now it goes into the production workflow. Now it hits our world, the WIP, work in progress. So the workflow there is where we're actually offline building the artwork, whether it's CS6, CS5s, your InDesigns, your illustrators, maybe you're doing motion, the list goes on. And now you're routing that through your production facility, and then you're sharing it back to the client. And the interface for the workflow there is that you're sharing it in a way that very quickly you're collaborating with the client, or the teams within the client are saying yes, no, annotations, reject, approve, and that's taking life cycles and moving them to days instead of weeks, right? So that's workflow to me, and that's where we're leveraging the if you will, the tactical DAM, where things are work in progress with, right? Now it's done, it's approved. It's then delivered to that medium through the same system. And then it said, okay, we're done. Now you're going to live in the strategic DAM. Now that strategic DAM is your DAM. It's living, it's referenceable. You're not doing workflow really, you're just using it for reference and a history, if you will. So, and then that gets, then we start all over again for the next season. So that's kind of my perspective, and I think we need to talk about workflow a little bit, because there is an integration to DAM, there should be, and I think more and more we're going to see DAMs having more workflow components to it, and it should.
Quick question for you. When you have the CS5, CS6 stuff, is that all in version control or put into the DAM while it's work in progress, or does it just stay?
No, it better be inherent in the system that you're using, that you have version control. Okay. Otherwise, we're in big trouble. That's a promise that we made.
I have to point out, thank you, a question I think we all actually agree on is this has to have, everything has to have workflow in it. It might not be the most complex workflow. If it doesn't have inherence with versioning, well, you should be mindful of that and make sure that your workflow accounts for it. That's a human workflow, manual process now. But all of these technologies are only going to do what you tell them to do. And everyone in this room, we're here to create something, or even more importantly, we're here to facilitate the creation for a lot of other people. And this does require workflow, and CMSs have had workflow for 10 or 15 years, the SharePoints and the Documentums, and I'm going to forget all of even the Drupals. They have out of the box this, then this, then this, and if this didn't work, loop back. I'm shocked that DAM systems, what I'm thinking is media management, doesn't have workflow inherently built in. It's got to be, any successful solution has got to be more than just dump a file in, let it sit there, and hope that it's going to move or be successful, because it's not. Someone else is going to go in and go, what's this file for? And hit delete. And if there's no version control, there's no approval, there's no what the next step is, that's more than a risk. That's a nightmare. So I would like to talk more about workflow, and I think the two of you have more direct experience in how workflow pertains in the DAM flow. So if one of you want to continue with that thought.
I'm trying to think where I could go further or expand on that. I mean, I think I did talk about it, but delineated that, first of all, workflows, let's go back. The DAMs today should have a workflow. And they do. The ones that we look at do. They have to. The best of breeds, and there are a lot of them out there. So, you know, as far as a perspective on workflow, I don't know how much deeper you can get, is, you know, being able to collaborate. Now, my workflow is different than your workflow, because my workflow is something that I think is a little bit more sophisticated, where I'm publishing and thumbnailing and being able to mark up, and I'm retaining that chain of custody, that history on those documentations. And quite frankly, if I didn't have that rigid history of tagging, and I know some of you have probably have the same systems, but you know, I can't work in the pharma industry unless I have 21 CFR Part 11 is part of my workflow process, and I have a chain of custody and a history and reporting capability about when that document was changed and who updated it and who approved it. So I think I don't want to lose the perspective that I just put on the table is workflows today dams today have very sophisticated workflows. And I think they have such that from a reporting aspect can go beyond what I think some of the CMS systems do. So that's my perspective.
Okay, so when I said we made the mistake of not putting workflow in, I literally meant that. We went through, when we architected the entire system, and we architected a lot of workflow into the CMS based on the internal editorial needs. They don't understand how to manage the assets because, you know, it used to be, it's ancillary to them. The writing the story is the important part. They want to produce this content. So the pictures are there in addition to the story. The videos there in addition to the story. We didn't address that. We addressed the workflow from the connection point in the DAM itself. So the workflow was still controlled in the CMS. But as I said, I think our big mistake was not working with them further to say, okay, you have to have this, you know, good example, chain of ownership, and also just even video, more importantly, going from raw to final product that you could keep in the system. And that was something, again, I can't even tell you if Intermedia, the DAM we had, does it. I think it does. We just never addressed it and were able to go around it.
With all this, we're missing another key component. Somebody said workflow is important. I agree. But in this whole process, we're also missing a very critical part, and that's the metadata tagging. And how do we actually smartly, intelligently tag those assets up front so there's a taxonomy that makes sense to the audiences within the organization. I love when you get these siloed parts of the organization that come up with the metadata and the taxonomy, but it speaks nothing to their organization as a whole, and they're completely lost and disconnected. So that's where, you know, I know we're talking CMS and we're talking DAM, but underneath that underpinning, that underbelly that we're missing here, we got to assume that very good practice in metadata tagging and taxonomy practices are there already, right? And that you understand the audiences are going to be looking at this stuff.
We have a question. Can I borrow that?
Absolutely.
If I heard you correctly, you said you have a whip dam and a strategic dam, right? Or tactical and a strategic dam.
I'd like to stick those two.
Right. Are you using one solution for both, or are those two different solutions? And what would make a good tactical dam versus a good strategic dam?
Depending on the client and the requirement. It's a great question. So depending on the client and the requirements, the DAM that we would say is a strategic, the DAM that is tactical, thank you. I'm better off saying whip. The DAM that is a work in progress can be, depending on the load, can be strategic too. So you parse out and you publish and you build your interface to it, right? But my best practice, I would recommend, especially with the clients that we're dealing with, that they would be two separate pieces. And there's a couple reasons for that. And again, this is today. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell you it may be one, right? And not that I'm pushing any technology. We used a lot of different technologies, but for example, with North Plains, we use Zynet Web Native. We also use Media Beacon, all right? But with North Plains, Zynet, they have 3 products now, and I know they've just hired a ton of people from Apple, and they're redeveloping things and rethinking their space, which is great. I'm glad we picked that horse so many years ago. The solution we have for a couple clients right now are the tactical asset system, or the WIP, is Zynet, and then the strategic site is where it migrates with XML in the back end, and I know over time they have another thing called Telescope. That will all be one, and there'll be more harmony with it. But I don't care about other systems right now. It's about the interoperability, the integration to it. So to answer your question, It's really it's based on some requirements of the clients, the breadth and depth of the assets and the frequencies. Most of the folks that we're working with, they would be two different asset systems, but integrated in the back end. Okay, if that makes sense. And I think over time, that's why I say today, that's the solution for a lot of folks. But we're going to see some folks like MediaBin and all those other players out there. It's one place, and at the end of the day, to the audience and the people that are using the system, it should seem like one place, right? The interface should do that for you, and it could live in different places. You just have really good integration. That answers your question.
So you all seem to agree that best-in-class DAMs should have a workflow component to some degree. Where should the points of intersection be between a DAM and a CMS? Are they definable, predictable parts of a DAM workflow? Does it play out that a DAM does its workflow, there's a handoff, and then the CMS does its business? Or does it vary from business case to business case, enterprise to enterprise?
I'll start with that. I think it does vary from case to case. I can't imagine a system where you're in DAM all the way and then at the end you just turn it over to CMS. That seems like what I dealt with 10, 15 years ago with the ECM world, my WordPerfect 5.1 files and all that good stuff. That creation and then archive. I again will defer to my panelists in terms of where those intersections are, but absolutely the taxonomy that brought up, and I'd love to maybe delve more into what we mean by taxonomy and why there's these siloed departments that speak in the weird languages that don't match the organizational taxonomy, and that's important to get right, and that facilitates the CMS and the DAM, I'm hoping, working together. And I'll skillfully pass it on.
It seems that you felt that there shouldn't be, that it isn't too sensible to have two totally separate
Right.
workflow circles. Gets to your idea, Mark, that maybe the idea of the two totally discrete systems is maybe an outdated idea.
What I was thinking is the fact that they do have to play with each other. I agree with you. They can't be, I do everything in the DAM, but the people who are going to work in one vertical, and again in the news industry, you've got, even though that's supposed to be the reporter, they're writing the story, and that is a very different set of rules, a very different set of thoughts, and a very different set of time than when they're going to go in and manage images or create a video or edit the video, because they have a number of minutes of raw video that they have to then edit down to create this story. And so that's why I think there needs to be separate workflows, but it almost would, my ideal situation is it's almost a handoff. It's, you start in the CMS, you hand off the workflow to the DAM, and then you shift to the DAM. In our case, the DAM component was integrated right in the CMS. I mean, that's what we did. We had the forms right there. So for that end user, they didn't have a clue that they were actually working directly into the DAM. They thought they were just in the CMS. And again, in some respects they were, because there was always a connecting point within the CMS that held on to that DAM's asset ID. That was one of the things that we wanted to make sure we did, so that we always held on to it. Now, one of the beautiful things about a DAM is be able to reuse that asset over and over again. Yeah, they didn't do that so much. They would just re-upload the photo again.
Yeah. That's where the interoperability with the CMS.
Well, no, we gave them the ability, the interoperability and the search capabilities. They still uploaded the new photo every time because it was on their desktop, and that was too complex to go look it up. Which gets to the tagging idea again, which is, an interesting thing, because it is one of the, I'm going to throw this out there. To me, where you tag in the CMS, and it has to do with the publishing aspect. When you tag in the CMS, you're tagging for your audience. You're tagging for your end user. When you tag in the DAM, you should be tagging for your internal audience to go reclaim that asset again and again. And those are the differences.
Okay, so.
What was that? Well, I mean, they could even be in the same place but at the end of the day, each one's going to be a different record anyway. But you're right. I mean, that's the idea, is that's where that handoff has to be. And I think you integrate it so that an end user can see one interface, one common interface they can work with, but you keep them separate because they do very different things, and you have to almost have a traffic cop, I think, that goes, the system itself that goes, I'm going to go here, okay, I'm going to take you over here. I'm going to go here, I'm going to take you over here. And in larger organizations, you're going to see people who specialize only in this aspect and people who only specialize in this aspect, and being able to access those individually is also good. But again, you know, like I said, our failure was that, when I look back and think, we didn't put workflow in that DAM side because we didn't give it the consideration that it was due. And I think that hopefully that's something they'll evolve over time. Possibly. I mean, I think actually, I think as we circle back around to the other part of the question, which is, can we create something standard? Sorry. Can we create something standard? You're going to find, again, not surprisingly, three different opinions, but where they lie. All right, you go ahead.
Okay, I think, and I have to stand by where I live in this space today. Again, two different systems we're going to publish in. I think I said earlier, we're going to publish the asset into the CMS. Yes, you could argue that I said something earlier where even when you create the creative brief in the creative lifecycle management part, which may live in the client, and they do use our system just to manage that. We don't even know what's going on. But we're doing it because we know there's going to be a handoff at some point where I'm going to do the artwork. So you could argue that there's some CMS things going on there. In the DAM, and I think, again, I said today, but in the future, I think that the DAM of today is going to be very different than the DAM tomorrow because of the evolution. Some of the things we're talking about now are going to resonate. You'll see more integration to CMS because we're going to get smarter about those platforms. When you have these big companies that I mentioned earlier working on things like this, and they're taking their portfolio of offerings, whether it's a foundational infrastructural solution set, or they have a DAM versus a strategic DAM and a workflow solution and all that, you see them all working on something that's going to be this one thing, right? I think that's where they're all going to go. But you have new technologies coming out too. Now here's a spin on things. So we just saw a technology that we're going to integrate where one of the challenges with a lot of brands that we work with is they shoot every season tons of product, and it comes into us, and then we do the artworking, whether it's retouching, silhouetting, whatever. But the problem is a lot of that stuff's been reshot. Even though they have the system, they know they are trying to taxonomy and metadata, all this stuff. There's a technology now that will take that photo shot and look at the bitmap and go, where is it in the database? And find that image. And we see this technology today on iPhones where you take a picture of something and it looks it up on the web. Well, we're thinking, why don't we use that to circumvent, and some people say it's cannibalizing some of our business because we want to work on it because that's an income. But let's be smart and say, client, guess what? You just sent in 240 images. 30 of those were already shot and retouched a year ago because we just put it through. And that to me is a CMS component where it's saying, I'm going to look through and I'm going to swipe your entire archive, whether it's a year or 2 years back, and see if I see any relevance or duplication, and we'll call it up. So to me, that's a CMS-like thinking, if you will. That's the right way to say it.
We started this chat with, DAM and CMS and media management and ECM. I think now we're talking three terms of taxonomy, federation, and interoperability. In a few years, we might have that huge converged DAM solution that does everything. But I think today, 2013, we're already where these systems, you have that value. You were able to pick up and say, hey, these files have already been uploaded. We've already touched them. We've already worked on them. There's no reason that your interfaces couldn't do the same thing when your newscasters go up and re-upload those video files. If you're asking 3 or 4 metadata questions and the taxonomy is built a certain way and your CMS is initially part of your workflow and it says, well, this file size looks about the same and it's from the same person who uploaded it, that you can't solve that problem. And now you don't need as much Amazon storage because you're not duplicating data. And I'll leave it at that.
I think one of the challenges going into this for me was, and one of my sort of wish list, my sort of Santa Claus wish was, I wish we could codify the best practices for integrating DAMs and CMSs, and realizing that just in my experience, however that integration needs to happen is going to be business to business, case by case. But thinking what kind of standards could we establish? And I seem to have heard on a technical level, and I'm not sure how in which order to approach these, but on a technical level, it seems like some core requirements are some XML communicability systems need to produce and accept and receive XML. And some penetrability, either through an API or an open source system or systems. Also, invisibility to the users. The users don't need to know or care that they're working in two different systems possibly, or receiving a handoff from two integrated systems. That should all be invisible. So invisibility seems critical too. Any other, is that oversimplifying? I'm not saying that defines the whole universe. Is that oversimplifying, and are there other
CMS
nuggets?
you get, I think if you're doing it smart, and we looked at this too with some clients, is it could start in the CMS system. There could be information there that if we're smart, we can exchange that through platform XML to the workflow. And as it goes through its life, then it exchanges again back to the CMS to update what's going on with that project. And there's a relationship back, if you will. So we've seen that, and we've, there are APIs, or, XML is the platform today. The XMP XML is a platform. So I don't see that as a challenge, and I think I think somebody mentioned this earlier. It depends on the requirements of the client, and what they have existing, and what can we leverage to help them with their CMS, or are we building it ourselves, or do they have a DAM, and we need to integrate our DAM with them too. We didn't talk about that, but so it can be the front end and the back end, and maybe in between, depending if how, again, requirements, if you need to update things through the CMS, if that's publishing statuses and such.
See, my opinion on this is pretty much, as we've watched these all evolve, that it's always been kind of like each individual person, their specific needs, and of course what you have is whether it's from a third party or even from your own product base, you deal only with what's in front of you and what that person wants. But I think, as we're going to see, as people move within an industry, this stuff starts to evolve. You get more people in open source that start talking to each other about both sides. The true best practices, maybe not the best breeds, but the true idea of best practices are going to come up, and you're going to start seeing, probably in each vertical, the best workflows for each one of those verticals, and you're going to see the products along those verticals. So writing a newspaper, gathering news and doing that, that's going to have a different look than creating a movie or creating video content, commercial video content. But there's similarities, they're going to overlap, but you're going to see the best practices shift depending exactly on where the balance is in terms of what the assets need to do and what they don't need to do.
Really, I wish we had a better answer for you, Chad. I really do. I think for today, get your taxonomy together, get the information to look the same behind the scenes. That transparency that you said, that's spot on. The users, they can't know what's going on. They don't need to know the software behind the scenes. But that taxonomy, those few key points of data, when we get to the convergence, we get the next versions, in 5 years from now, 2018, when we had 5 more upgrades, the data will just start flowing together. It'll get closer. It'll just, maybe osmosis is the best answer. We'll get there, but don't try and push it.
That's what I thought you'd say. Mark, I'm really intrigued by what you were saying, that you kind of see the evolution of DAM going into sort of vertical specific kind of channels. Okay.
I think they're both going to, I think you're going to see them coming.
Could you talk more about that?
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I mean, at the end of the day, you're boiling the information down to some kind of content that requires a taxonomy, that requires additional meta tagging. You want to search it for usability. You want to be able to publish it. You want to be able to manage. I mean, it goes through all of it. It's like there has to be version control. There has to be content. There has to be taxonomy. There has to be meta tagging, and it's there both for end content and for internal use. And these apply to both the DAM and to the CMS. And so you can't just, like, you can make one banking system because, there's, or like a Quicken, because everybody has the same accounting rules. But you can't do that with these content management tools. But what we have is we have the Wild Wild West, where everybody, like, has their own individual spin on, this is the best way to do it for me. Well, I've watched Product Evolution all the time, where it's like, okay, everybody might have had their own different style at one point, but you start knocking out the inefficiencies, and you start realizing that part of my style works, but part of it doesn't, whereas part of his style might work and part of it doesn't, and you eventually get those all together. My favorite thing over the last few years has been the addition of like an autocomplete function in a lot of these CMSs, either for tagging or for lookup. And you see, like, if you go to Wikipedia and you go to type something at the beginning, you'll watch it pull down stuff from the database that is equivalent to what you're typing, and it puts it in the order of, like, most searched in the drop-down list as you're looking for it. So if you're looking up Duck Dynasty and you start typing it, it's going to start showing up. That kind of stuff is very powerful, and it creates tagging, taxonomies, and metadata that's very reusable, and everyone starts adopting it because it's really good and real easy, and you see it come into play. So you don't have people having to, like, it's a very creative, very straightforward way of doing things. That's it.
Ken, where do you see I'm thinking DAM, but not just DAM, CMS, ECM, where do you see it going?
I think that, well, I'm going to just say what I repeated earlier, is that you're going to see these bigger companies, if they're smart, they're going to integrate more and more CMS components to the DAM. Again, we've got to get a perspective of my space. I'm doing the artworking, managing these heavy assets, updating, repurposing, adapting them for whatever channels they're going into, a lot of heavy lifting, collaborating, all that. That space I live in, I think over time you're going to see more the best of breed that we deal with today. In time, they're going to be smarter about integrating CMS at some aspect. That doesn't mean we can't do it today. We can do it through XML. We're smart about making sure that the prerequisite for those folks today, that they have that exchange in the background, and they know they have to be competitive, right? So one other thing I was just thinking about is, we're talking about DAMs and solutions here for bigger brands with a lot of assets, right? Most of the stuff that we're talking about heavy lifting and big enterprise systems, if you will. But what about those smaller companies that can't afford these bigger solution sets and the resources? What's wrong with FileMaker Pro? Discuss that. I mean, if you're a small company, that becomes a CMS and a DAM in itself. And, as much as we were kind of joking about it earlier, I can't find a kink in that software for a certain size company, small to maybe mid-size. So it's a relationship database. You got portals, you got containers, and you got everything you can possibly do there very quickly, very cheaply. Anyway, that's my perspective.
You say that if companies are smart, they'll move towards that integration. What are the blocks to it besides technology?
It's taking the cult here. It's taking the cult.
Budget a big part of it, or what do you see?
Again, I'm not that knowledgeable about some of those, the media bins of the world and the North Plains folks, picking on those two, the Zanzas and the Vidi Spines and all those Falcon Store, all those things that help you scale, and they're very robust. What I do know is that there are events like this, and there's so much competition in that space right now, and you've got kids developing certain things that we're talking about earlier that are very, very compelling, but don't have the scalability and robust platforms yet. And they could be the leaders next. So I think what's happening is, and I see it, is they're getting smart to say, we got to think differently now. And I think, again, not to pick on Zynet. Zynet was by themselves. They got bought by North Plains. They had a fantastic technology called Telescope, and it was catering to more of the media stuff, right? They also saw that they need to get away from that rigid built database that they had, and they need to go to more of a Google search. So I saw them transition, and I see that their goal sets are for the future, and saying, all right, now we're going to hire 20 people from Apple because we like the thinking. So those are things that tell me, give me a hint that they're going to develop something that's going to be compelling, not today, but 2 years down the road too. And MediaBin's doing the same, and some of the other, the major players in that space. Because at the end of the day, yeah, terabytes are going down, right? Storage is going to go down. It's about the application, the flexibility, the fluidness of it, being able to intuitively understand it from an administrative standpoint as well. And if a client or a place like us or a brand that's going to onboard a system like that, making it very smooth in the, if you will, the deployment of the solution set, right? And again, we're all assuming that there are best practices around this and that these tools are magic. They're not. It's about how do you, we're talking about taxonomy and metadata disciplines and understanding the audience and what you're publishing to them. So given all those things, I think that they're going to get to that space where they're integrating more CMS components, if you will. And I also still think, to your point, it depends on that vertical, and what the solution sets or the requirements are around it in the lifecycle management part.
I wanted to agree. I think there's going to be. I wanted to 2 times now tonight. We're doing better than our call.
That's right.
There's going to be more and more vertical CMSs. There's going to be more and more highly specialized. This is the structure. And what do we mean by all these different CMSs? It's all the metadata that they have out of the box. It's all the structure, the UI, the interface, the comfort. The pharma is going to go in and go, oh, this looks kind of like what I need, and I can adjust it. Or Philip Morris, it looks close enough, and we can't get sued. This is great. So there's going to be more and more of these CMSs. I think there's going to be less and less of these DAM solutions at the high end. The complexity, the difficulty to make these systems, these workflows work well, it's not easy to do, and you can't have hundreds of companies with 1,000 or so developers, which I think was your litmus earlier, Ken. There's only so many of these that are going to be out there. And good news with the autocomplete, with some of these bigger ECM, large CMS systems, they're not only doing autocomplete, they're doing auto classification now. I'll actually name drop a vendor finally, OpenText, which has a digital asset management system. They're going through and starting the beginning of auto classification of the videos that you're uploading, not just the documents. And it's more than just knowing the author. It can read through and know, oh, this is Breaking Bad, and I need to know something about this, or this is a Vogue magazine, it has a watermark in the corner. Whatever you have to do. The more we get to the auto classification, the more we get these specialized CMS systems, the less the news people of the world or the content creators are going to have to define their taxonomy, because the system's going to handle it for them. It's going to be more transparent, and everyone will be more about the product and less about the tool. So we're headed down the right track.
Well, it's almost 8 o'clock. Does anybody have any questions?
So one question I have is that on the technical side, the more developed a CMS or DAM gets, and the more it's operating in a silo, the more likely it is that the XML or HTML backbone is going to be some sort of customized language. So how, when you get to that point where you're like, let's integrate, how do you decide to marry the two? How do you go about kind of making sure that those two standards that have developed work well together? Because that's a significant hurdle that I face.
Can you give us an example? Yeah. Like, because at a high level, you have your API out, you have your API in, you have the fields have to match up, and all the XML does is combine it together to have one talk to the other. So where exactly is the complications that you're referring to?
I guess what I'm referring to is that, so I work for Kaplan Test Prep, and within Kaplan there are different business units. Each business unit has their own LMS, content management system, and each one is backed up by a customized XML language.
Okay. That's
And
the back of their system.
yes.
Okay.
And so The impetus, though, is to merge all of these systems so that we're not duplicating content across 5 different business units where, maybe just author it once and then push it out to whatever the different outputs are. So the challenge is you have these systems that are maturing. They have these unique XML or HTML backbones. How do you go about doing that?
Let me try it. All right, so in your particular case, you have, like I said, you have 5 systems, and they all have different XML out. The one thing you would have to do is your XML backup is just backing up your database. It's just creating a copy of that, of your each one of those applications. You're going to have to go through all 5 of them and find the common components between each one of them, and each one of them is going to have a common language. Even if it's a superset of all of them, you have to have a common language for them to talk through. And that's the only way you'll be able to do it. Now, the nice thing about XML, and we keep throwing XML out there, I think it's funny because my developers used to make fun of me for wanting to use XML. They're all using JSON now. So it's the same thing. At the end of the day, you're creating a very straightforward, readable document, and that's what XML is. So if you look at what are the commonalities between all the systems, even if they're named differently, the nice thing you can do with the XML is you can give it all the same name. Somebody may have surname, last name, and family name. 3 different fields, they all mean the same thing. In your XML output of the API that all 5 share, you can decide its last name, and when it spits it out, it all just says last name equals whatever that field is, and that's how you solve the commonality problem. But you would have to put that kind of work in. You couldn't just take the raw dump. It's like anything else. It's like this structure is going to be one way, this structure is going to be another way. You have to find a way for them to have common. You going to rebut this?
No, I'm going to add to it. I have a bad rap already. I wanted to add what I said earlier about federation, and this gets back to taxonomy and converging those 5 systems and the 3 names. That's a great example of getting just remediated updates and saying everything should say last name. We all can agree on this. Start with a federation app in the middle and focus bringing everyone to say, let's use this one federated app, and then it can go and talk, oh, you're in Boston, so you're going to go over to this CMS system. You're in LA, you're going to go over to this CMS system. But bring them through a common interface, and don't try and do everything at once. Evolve your solution. Roll it over time, and you'll be successful. Any other questions?
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, panelists. Very appreciated. It's a great conversation. And I've been told to reiterate the plug for video sponsorship into a microphone that works. So, hey, everybody, we're videotaping this meetup. We would like to continue videotaping for an entire year. We need sponsorship to do that. If anybody has any information about potential sponsors, please let us know. We're eager and ready to reach out to anybody who would help us capture these conversations and put them online. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.